GG Week is a great opportunity to do some of the things which we know we have to do if we're going to achieve the targets that we've set ourselves, that our governments have set themselves. But in terms of how do you make that happen? What works, what doesn't work? What can we learn from each other about what's the program of action that you need, the practical program of action you need to make something happen and take us in the direction that we have to go. One of the great challenges, I think, of supporting governments is actually giving them the information they need to be able to do what they want to do. It's one thing for governments, policymakers, even for the private sector, to say we want to make the right decisions, but they need the evidence base in order to be able to make those decisions and to carry forward policies in a sensible way. So I think one of the great challenges is how do you build that evidence base? Some of that's data, but some of it is evidence about what works and what doesn't work. And that's, I think, one of the great advantages of this kind of week, this kind of sessions, where we can pick up that evidence and begin to work together towards getting it, amassing that evidence. One of the great problems, I think, with our world is it gets more and more complicated. Now, it's not a bad thing, but it's just a fact of life that our economies, our societies, even the environment gets more and more complicated. So actually, rising to those challenges is what we have to do. Finding data in that kind of world is increasingly difficult, but fortunately we've also got some advantages. We've got the great advantage of the coming on stream of administrative data, big data, huge sources which actually even a few years ago would be unthinkable. So now the challenge is how do you use that information and distill it into useful evidence, useful data, useful statistics that governments and other decision makers can really use to underpin good decision making. Well, some of these innovative ways forward, I think, include things like Earth observation data. Tells us what's happening to the world as of yesterday, not of what was happening 5 years ago. Some of the information we pick up from operations just of everyday life, movements of traffic around cities, movement of traffic around countries. What does that tell us about needs and pressures? Now, of course, there are challenges to go with that. We have to use that data in a way which respects people's data privacy, respects their rights as citizens, but nevertheless uses that information to best effect. That kind of information usage, I think we're on something of a cusp. But actually a number of statistics agencies around the world, some of them official statistics agencies, some of them private bodies, have now begun to use that information about health trends, about environmental trends, about movement trends, all of this information starting to be used. I wouldn't pick out, I think, any one single body which is doing that. And actually one of the great advantages, coming back to the advantages of a week like this, is learning from each other about who is doing what and how we can actually replicate to good effect that same kind of methodology, those same kinds of approaches in other countries as well. I think the biggest takeaway from GGG Week so far for me has been the movement in the debate, I think, from what should we do to knowing more or less what we have to do, but starting to think about how can we do that? How can we get through those barriers of political economy, through those barriers of lack of finance? What are the positive steps we have to do to overcome those barriers? So I think the debate has moved on for me from what I've learnt this week, from not what do we have to do, but actually how are we going to focus on the problems and how are we going to take them forward and solve them.